Are the Buccaneers still out of the contender conversation because of their linebackers? That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And, of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. We are diving into the mailbag on today's episode, talking about the receiver room as well as one of the new rookies. Real quick, I want to apologize. I was so sick over the weekend. I'm sure you can hear, still battling this cold. So, I get winded really easily, can't breathe through my nose. I'm going to try to get through this episode without a coughing fit. But I appreciate all of you sticking with me here. But I want to start this thing off with the overwhelming concern of many of you when you were all reaching out for this mailbag episode with the insider. So Fausto, Scotty, Ricky, Mike all asked some variation of the same question, as well as many others that were concerned. And it's what I think about the linebacker room. And a lot of people asked if I'm good with it, if the Bucs still need to add a player, if it's the weak spot that's going to cost them. Is it the difference between winning a championship and losing in the divisional round or the wild card round? But there is still a widespread concern about the linebacker position since the Bucs did not take one in the draft. Now, maybe the concern is partially my fault because I talked so much leading up to the draft about how it was one of their biggest needs entering that draft because I truly felt that it was. Now, perhaps Jason Licht and Todd Bowles see it differently, or it could be because I was higher on the linebacker class than most. I felt that there was talent across all 7 rounds at the linebacker position. I felt that Jahad Campbell was more than worthy of the 19th overall pick. The Bucs obviously felt different. So here's what the Bucs have at linebacker right now: Lavonte David, Servassier Dennis, Anthony Walker, Deion Jones, Antonio Greer, Deion Jennings, and John Bullock. I think Lavonte and Dennis are your starters, with Walker being a rotational player that is going to get plenty of opportunities as he and Servassier kind of platoon that spot next to Lavonte. That allows Lavonte to go back to being Lavonte, while Dennis and Walker are more the run stoppers, blitzers, kind of that role. I'll talk more about Walker's run stopping prowess in a little bit, but Lavonte is far better than both of them in coverage, but he's also far better than both of them at everything because Lavonte David, for all intents and purposes, should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. But he's primarily going to return to the role that he has typically played, especially while Devin White was there. And, you saw kind of the differences in those two playing styles. Now, to be fair, Servassier Dennis, we have yet to see him play when he's actually healthy. He's been dealing with that shoulder injury since coming out of college, and then he finally got surgery on it once it became too much to play through. So we've never actually seen what he's fully capable of, and maybe that's a big part of what the Buccaneers are banking on this season. He has shown enough flashes that he's worth trotting out there to get a lot more playing time, potentially be a full-time starter, and it's just that the jury is still out as to whether or not he can fulfill that full-time starter role, just because we've never had an opportunity to see him try to do it. Now, if he isn't capable of doing that. Walker is your insurance policy. Dennis becomes the rotational guy that comes in during passing situations, while Walker is more the first and second down guy. He plays the run, he plays the pass, but Dennis becomes your pass rush specialist at inside linebacker. Walker, who struggled at Miami last year, was a really solid linebacker from 2021 to 2023 in Cleveland. He's much better in coverage than he is as a run defender or a pass rusher, but he has plenty of experience to where you can trust him to play on all three downs. He's had some major ebbs and flows when it comes to his run defense and his ability to pass rush, but his ability to pass rush has never really been all that great. So it's more the run defense that is a little bit concerning because he has had such peaks and valleys throughout his career in that category. Now, he's much more consistent in pass coverage, which maybe that opens up, Levante to be able to blitz a little bit more, to be able to, roam a little bit more freely. But the biggest issue you have there with Walker is the missed tackle percentage being above 12% each of the last 3 seasons. That is a huge problem. But I think he's probably a slight step up from KJ Britt last year. But then if you take a look at he and Servassier Dennis combined, if they platoon this thing, then they're together a big step up from what KJ Britt was able to offer last year. So, a few of you asked if the Bucs should still go out and get someone, considering they cleared all that cap space and the position still feels, somewhat questionable. My question is, who are you going to go get? You can say, oh, well, the Bucs just need to go get someone. Well, they could have gotten someone a week and a half ago in the draft, and they didn't. There were opportunities in free agency to go out and get someone. They got Anthony Walker. But you have Eric Kendricks out there. He's 33 years old. CJ Mosley, he's going to be 33 when the season starts. Are they going to upgrade the position that much? Devondre Campbell is 32. You have Jawan Bentley, who's 29. But all of these guys are still available for a reason. All the free agents out there are still available for a reason. So are the Bucs really going to sign them for $5, $6, $7 million to come in over what they already have on the roster? I personally don't think so. I don't think any of them are really that much of an upgrade, if an upgrade at all, considering what the Bucs already have. So what's the other option? Well, I did do a show a couple months ago at this point about Jermaine Pratt when he said that he wanted out of Cincinnati. So is trading for Pratt still an option? Maybe, but unlikely. He's in a contract year. He's 29 years old. So you're basically getting a 1-year rental. Now, the Bengals could probably let him go considering what they did in the draft. They took both Demetrius Knight Jr. and Barrett Carter. So they drafted 2 linebackers to come in. So Pratt seems expendable at this stage. He already appears to be on his way out, but he's also set to make over $8 million this year. His missed tackle percentage is right on par with Walker's. His coverage grades over the last 3 years are lower on average than Walker's. His run defense over the same span on average is a little bit higher. But is he going to come in and be that much more of an upgrade over Dennis or Walker? I say no. I don't think he will be. At this stage of the game, Jermaine Pratt is what he is. I think the ceiling of Servassier Dennis is higher than what you're going to get out of Pratt. So you take a look at Pratt, and he was a mid player last year on the league's worst defense. So I can't say that I'm overly confident that he would come in and all of a sudden elevate the defense from the middle linebacker position. All in all, I do think that linebacker is currently the weakest position group on the team, but at the same time, this team is absolutely loaded with talent. So that's not exactly an insult or a slight against the linebacker group. There has to be a position group on the team that comes in last. And in the case of the Buccaneers, it's the linebackers. They've upgraded every other position group on the defense. They upgraded edge rusher. They upgraded their defensive line rotation. They upgraded cornerback. Maybe they upgraded safety. We're going to have to see if Tyke Smith is an upgrade over Jordan Whitehead, but I would argue that it's going to be hard for him to not be an upgrade over Jordan Whitehead, considering the lack of production that Jordan had last year. So my final advice would be take a breath and let this thing play out. Let's see what the plan is for linebacker as we get into OTAs and training camp, because right now it's pure speculation on my part that they're going to have a platoon approach. But I firmly believe that Servassier Dennis has the tools to be a starter and that he hasn't scratched the surface of what he's capable of because of the injury that he was playing through. So that's over now. It's fixed. He deserves a chance to show what he can do. And let's face it, it really can't get worse than it was last year. It could stay the same, but it can't get any worse. What's going on with the Buccaneers receiver room? That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Scaling your business requires the right expertise at the right time. With Upwork, you can find specialized freelancers in marketing, development, design, and more, experts that are ready to help you take your business to the next level. Upwork gives businesses flexibility by connecting them with top freelance talent across multiple industries, including IT, AI, web development, and marketing. Whether you need extra hands for a project or a long-term partner, Upwork makes hiring simple and affordable. Posting a job is free and simple, and within a day, with multiple qualified candidates to choose from. Visit Upwork.com right now and post your job for free. That's UPWORK.com. Upwork.com to connect with top talent and grow your business today. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every single day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and news never stops. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So we did have a couple of questions roll in about the receiver room. So Scotty asked, how many wide receivers do the Bucs go into the 2025 season with on the active roster? I think it's 7. Mike, Chris, J-Mac, Ibuka, Shepard. Who are your 6th and 7th if you think they keep 7? Then who do you trade and who is practice squad? Then JJ asked about Tez Johnson specifically. I will talk about him in a moment, JJ. And Insider David asked, supposing Godwin isn't ready for week 1, who are you locking in as wide receiver 2? All right, there's a lot to unpack here, but I'm excited to talk about it because this wide receiver room is going to be so much fun. But I'm going to start at the top. Let's start with what Scotty's talking about, and we're going to work our way down. I do think the Bucs keep 7. At least that's my feeling as of right now. I'm kind of on the fence of 6 or 7, but I am leaning a little closer to 7. I'm going to have to really sit down and do like a post OTAs depth chart kind of prediction so that I can see how all these positions shake out, because that's what it's really going to boil down to. The Bucs could sacrifice a 7th wide receiver if they need that position elsewhere. But just off the cuff, I'll go ahead and say 7. So you have Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Ibuka, Shepard. They're locked in right now. And then you have Tez Johnson. Okay, I think he's locked in. And then Rakim Jarrett, I think, is probably the last one if you're talking about 7. If they only keep 6, I think Tez is the one that makes the active roster. But the Bucs really have an embarrassment of riches at wide receiver, because beyond those guys, you still have Trey Palmer, Ryan Miller, Will Shepard, Cameron Johnson, and Garrett Green. So here's how I see all of this shaking out. Let's say, for the sake of argument, they keep 6. So last year on the active roster, when week 1 rolled around, the Bucs only had 5. So we'll say that they add 1 more for this year. So that's Evans, Godwin, McMillan, Ibuka, Shep, and Tez. Then on the practice squad, I think you're keeping 3. Ryan Miller, Rakim Jarrett, and Cameron Johnson. Will Shepard, Garrett Green, yes, Trey Palmer, they're cut. They're finito. I don't think that the Bucs are trading any of these guys. The only one that they might be able to flip is Shepard for a late round pick because he does have a proven track record, but even that seems unlikely. You're really not going to get anything in a trade for a receiver that every team in the NFL knows that you're going to have to cut anyway. Every once in a while, we see these training camp trades where a team's like, you know what, I'll give up a day 3 pick to ensure that I get this guy and he doesn't hit free agency with these cuts so that we can ensure that we get him. But at best, maybe you're getting like a 2027 7th for someone with the potential of Rakim Jarrett or Cameron Johnson, but that's still unlikely. A team can turn around and pluck them off your practice squad and add them to their active roster and not have to give up anything. So I think the tough situation is going to be this. I know that they just signed him back and that he's Baker's dude, but I think Sterling Shepard is a sneaky cut candidate. He's not really going to see the field all that much unless there's an injury, and he's the 5th guy out there. The Bucs are not going to draw up packages just for him. He doesn't have any skills that warrant specialized packages. So he may go out there for a play or two while someone catches their breath, but this is going to be a very competitive position group in camp because you have 8 guys battling for 2 spots. Now, I said I think Tez is locked in as one of these wide receivers because of the special teams aspect. I did have one insider write in asking if I thought the Bucs upgraded special teams enough. Yes, absolutely. Tez as the return man and then Dixon at punter, the special teams for the Bucs got a shot of adrenaline right in the arm this offseason. So if Tez is locked in as the specialist, plus he does offer a skill set that warrants certain situations and packages on offense, then the other 8 are battling for wide receiver 5 and wide receiver 6. That is going to be epic when camp rolls around. I absolutely cannot wait to see it. As for the Godwin question, look, Jason Licht has maintained that the Bucs are expecting Godwin on the field in week 1. However, if he's not able to go, because things happen. I'm watching my son go through rehab right now. Granted, his is for an ACL, Godwin's is for an ankle, but things happen. There are setbacks. So if Godwin is not able to go, who am I expecting to be the wide receiver 2? Emeka Egbuka. All right, calm down, because I know some of you just yelled at me through your podcast player or at the screen on YouTube. But here's why. If Godwin can't go, Egbuka steps into the Godwin role in the slot. Evans is Evans, and then McMillan is your other outside receiver. So with Egbuka being the slot guy, those Godwin routes, those Godwin targets, especially on third downs, they're going to Emeka Egbuka. He may legitimately have the best hands on the team after Godwin. So he's going to be a natural fit in that role, and he and Baker are going to have the trust to move the sticks and make big plays on third downs. So is that why the Bucs took him? No, not directly, because he can play all 3 spots. But that's your insurance policy right now if Godwin isn't ready for the start of the season, or God forbid he suffers another injury. McMillan and Evans have their roles, and Shep can't fill those shoes. That was evident last season. So I would expect Egbuka to wind up side by side with Mike Evans in terms of targets, receptions, and yards if he has to start in place of Godwin, because they don't want to rush him back, or if there is a setback, or if something happens to where Godwin is not ready to roll in week 1. Real quick, JJ also asked how much weight I think Desmond Watson needs to lose to be a viable part of the defensive line rotation. He's already lost some weight, but I think he can play at about 415, 420. And honestly, with as smooth as he was at 465, I would want him around 420. That's my goal line defense. That's my 4th and short defense. I want him next to Vita in those situations. And I think that's why he has a shot to make this team. I really, truly do. I would say if he's part of the rotation, it's going to be early downs and it's going to be running situations. But I think he still stays over 400 because he was such a solid player at almost 500 pounds. So if you shed a little bit of that weight, but you still keep that size and you're still a disruptor in the interior of the offensive line, that's what I want out of him. And he and Vita next to each other, man, that would be fun to watch. All right, what makes one of the Bucs draft picks better than previous ones? That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. Wrapping things up here on a Monday edition of the Locked On Bucs podcast. And shout out to Insider Mike. He did send a couple of really, really good questions. I'm going to answer at least one of those on tomorrow's show because a really intriguing one that he sent in asked where I would rank the Bucs versus the rest of the NFL in various categories. So, Mike, I didn't want you to think that I forgot you. I just had a lot of people asking me about the same things. I wanted to knock those out first, but I got answers coming up for you tomorrow. But I do want to get to Tom's question here because I have seen a couple of concerns on social media, and Tom is expressing the same thing. So I figured, you know what? Other people are thinking about this. I'm going to go ahead and address it. But he's basically wondering what makes Benjamin Morrison someone that can make a difference. Tom said, I think Benjamin Morrison will turn out to be a great corner, but I do have some hesitation. Light's last second-round corners were Sean Murphy-Bunting, MJ Stewart, and Carlton Davis. Vernon Hargreaves was a bust first-rounder. I also remember a lot of hype around second-rounder Jonathan Banks, although that was before Light. What makes Morrison different than all of them to make Bucs fans confident in his future? Tom, that's a great question, man. And I'm going to start by saying this. Morrison should not have been a second rounder, but because of the injury, here we are. At the end of the day, he was a second rounder, and you listed off some corners here that make us all shudder a little bit. Now, I was very anti-Vernon Hargreaves. I honestly cannot remember if David and I had a show at the time. I think we did. I think when Hargreaves was drafted, we either had our old Walking the Plank podcast or we had just started Locked On Bucs. But I hated that pick. I didn't want anything to do with Vernon Hargreaves joining the Bucs. I thought he was a terrible fit for the defense. I thought he was a terrible fit against the kind of receivers that the Bucs had to face in the NFC South. I absolutely despise it. I was live on a show when that pick was made, and I had to hang up because I was so angry. I lost my mind. All that said, I am going to defend Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy-Bunting a little bit. Look, they were good corners. SMB was a huge reason that the Bucs won the Super Bowl. He went on an absolute tear in the 2020 playoffs. 3 interceptions in the postseason on their way to a championship. Davis was nails. I will forever reference Jamar Chase saying that Davis was the toughest corner he had faced in his career up to that point, which was in an interview in 2023. SMB going down in week 1 against the Cowboys in 2021 was a gut punch. Davis going down every single year threw a wrench in a lot of things that the defense wanted to try to do. That's where the problems were. It wasn't their play. It was that they were injury prone. Now, could Morrison wind up on the same path? Absolutely. Anybody can. We don't know. Sometimes your body does not hold up with your career choice. We saw it with O.J. Howard. We see it every year with Jamel Dean. We've seen it outside of the Buccaneers world. We've seen it with Christian McCaffrey. Some guys are always going to deal with injuries. But I think what makes Morrison different here is at this stage in his career, he's overall just a better player than those other guys were when they were drafted. He is a far more complete football player, not just corner, a more complete football player than all of those other guys were. Davis, SMB, Stewart, even Hargreaves. They were all guys that showed potential, but still needed development. Morrison is a complete player. That's not to say that he's perfect or that he can't get better, but he doesn't have any glaring weaknesses that has coaches saying, we need to make sure that we fix this before he can get on the field. That's why Morrison was a consensus top 20 pick before his injury last year. His all-around game is just already at a higher level than all of those other draft picks were. And look, GMs are going to miss on guys sometimes. It happens. Jason and his crew have done an amazing job over the last few years, but not every pick is going to pan out. I do think that the Carlton Davis and Sean Murphy Bunting picks did. Yeah, now they're in other places. The Bucs, let SMB walk because in free agency because they couldn't afford to keep him and Davis and Jamel. So they made a choice. Now they end up trading Carlton Davis, and you saw that legitimately the Lions defense struggled when he went down with injury last year. So, they're still playing well. It's just in other places. Stewart, Hargraves, they fizzled out and disappeared. I mean, to be fair, MJ Stewart switched to safety and he's been in Houston the last 3 years, but I have no idea where Vernon Hargraves is at this point. His last game was in 2021 for the Bengals. But I think the other big difference for Morrison is his path. The adversity that he has had to overcome, going through that injury, having the surgery, watching his team go through the college football playoffs and get to a championship and then lose because he wasn't out there and couldn't help go up against one of the best receivers in all of college football, like he did against that exact same team the year before. It hit him hard. And I mentioned it before that he talked to us at the combine that injury made him realize just how much he truly loves the game of football and what he's willing to do to be as great as he can possibly be. But you could see in his face when he had to talk about the national championship and not being out there, how much that hurt him. Like, you could see legitimate pain on his face that he had finally reached his goal of being a captain of one of the most prestigious football programs in the nation. And then to have the rug pulled out from under him and miss the opportunity to play for a championship with Notre Dame, it gutted him. That kind of drive, that kind of work ethic and attitude, it's not taught. You literally cannot teach that. That is 100% on the individual to find that drive, find that internal motivation, and use it. Morrison absolutely does. If you guys haven't seen the video put out by Notre Dame football's social media team about Benjamin Morrison, go watch it, and you're going to see exactly what I'm talking about. It's about 13 minutes long. It shows you exactly who the Bucs are getting, not just in a football player, but in a person. And look, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is one of the worst, evaluations that I've ever had in my life. It's one of the dumbest moves I've ever made to stand on a table and pound a table for this guy. Maybe Morrison isn't any better than those players. Maybe he's closer to MJ Stewart than Rondé Barber. But it's not going to be because of a bad work ethic. It's not going to be because of a low IQ. And it's not going to be because he doesn't have the physical tools to excel. Now, I hope I'm right because it's going to be what's best for the Buccaneers as a team, for the present and for their future. But I think Morrison is ultimately cut from a different cloth than any other corner that Jason Licht has ever drafted. That's going to do it for this episode. We do have more of the mailbag to get through, including Insider Mike asking where I think the Bucs rank against the rest of the NFL. And if you're not an insider and you do have a mailbag question, send them to the DMs on Twitter at Locked On Bucs. You can do it there. I mean, you could become an insider, but if you don't want to do that and you still have a question that you want addressed, send it at Locked On Bucs on Twitter in the DMs. And I will get to as many of them as I possibly can. But that's going to do it for this episode. Please make sure that you are subscribed on YouTube with the notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcast. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And of course, you can follow everything on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. I want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.